Hey everyone, it's Peter from Daydream Nation, and I've got John the Music Nut back to the channel. How are you, John?
Doing great, Peter. How about you?
Doing well, doing well. We are going to talk about a artist that we haven't covered previously on Daydream Nation, and the artist in question is Steve Earle with his 1988 album Copperhead Road. John, the title track Copperhead Road got a fair amount of radio airplay in Australia and certainly had a bit of an impact in America. Steve Earle has certainly had a very long career, a lot of albums, and he is sort of like one of the pioneers of crossover country music, red dirt music, alternative country, etc., etc. What we're going to do is we're going to talk about our first impressions of Steve Earle in the day, and then we'll do a song-by-song analysis and maybe just give our take on the album with 2024 ears. So, John, can you tell us about your first encounter with Steve Earle, say, in 1988?
Thanks, Peter. They play Copperhead Road heavy on album-oriented rock radio. They played a lot on Rock 107 out of Scranton, Pennsylvania, station which is still going strong here. And they played that heavy, and they played Devil's Right Hand heavy too. I'm sorry, they played Backs to the Wall heavy. And I got intrigued, and I bought the album in '89. And it was an album that I've always enjoyed. And I still think it's a very good album. It's held up well. And the thing about Steve Earle is his sound is like changed throughout the years. Like once he cleaned up, he became solely a singer-songwriter. His attitude was, I'm just going to do what I want, and I'm going to do whatever genre I want. And I know that there's an audience out there that really appreciates my songs. But this is a very good album. And I mean, I liked it so much back then, and I do now. And it is like an album of two halves too, which we'll get into as well.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, the big hit was definitely Copperhead Road. I was very familiar with that song because it got played everywhere, and it was kind of like a pseudo anthem. I have to admit, I wasn't familiar with a lot of Steve Earle's other songs, so listening to this CD for this show was a little bit of a discovery, which is unique. And I agree, it's definitely a song, it's an album of two sort of song cycles. You've got the first half, which is very sort of in-your-face country rock. Steve Earle described some of the songs as country meets heavy metal, which we might have a bit of a chat about. And then the second half, which would have been side two, was very much more love songs, more sentimental, the romantic side. So dual personalities on this album, it's quite an interesting listen. So why don't we, without further ado, let's tackle the songs, and that'll give our viewers a little bit more of a take on this album, Copperhead Road. So just a little bit of business. It came out on October 17, 1988. I looked at the chart placings. I kind of assumed it was kind of a top 40 or top 30 smash in America, but it wasn't. So this album was more of a cult type following. Suspect that it's one of those albums that's a sleeper and, you know, sold a lot of copies over a period of time. So Copperhead Road, let's talk about that. That's an iconic song, bit of an anthem. What do you think of this song?
Well, this is his signature song. This is his most popular song. That beginning there, it sounds a lot like bagpipes. That's actually a keyboard playing that music, that beginning there before the mandolin comes in. And this is a song, it's a story song about people who were getting into the making dope business, and they were making moonshine. And it just has this timeless feel. It does have an anthem feel when it gets into the chorus. Actually, when the chorus goes in and then the electric guitars come in. most because during the verses he's playing the mandolin. It's more of an acoustic song, but there is some drama being brought in with the little flourishes of electric guitar. But it's a kick-ass song. It still goes over well. He always plays it. It's always in the middle of his set, and it's it's a fantastic song. I mean, it's one of those songs where if you ever mention Steve Earle, a lot of people say, "Oh, he sang Copperhead Road."
Yeah, it's his signature song for sure. I think it's a bit of a masterpiece, and just reading a lot of folks' comments about the song, all the critiques, a lot of people think that this is a song about America. It's a slice of life of America. I think Tennessee have sort of owned this song as their sort of state anthem or pseudo state anthem. It's really Steve in storyteller mode. He's a wonderful storyteller, and his story about a cross generational family of bootleggers, and then they go into growing dope. Just the way he writes his story, it's sort of compelling. Musically, I wouldn't say it's a very expansive melody, and gets played on classic radio to this very day. What about in America?
Not as much as it used to, but you still hear it now and then.
Yeah,
What was
absolutely.
interesting back then, and was interesting back then, was when he came out with Guitar Town, which was his debut. He was more of a country artist. He was getting played as one of these upcoming country singers, and the feel of that album is very late '80s country music. It's a more polished. But by here, this was his third album after Exit Zero. This is this and the next album, The Hard Way, is about as over an album. This was as close as he would get to hard rock. This and Hard Way was the only time he really crossed over to AOR.
Why would he have said country meets heavy metal? What's your take?
Well, the guitars got a lot more distortion. They're a lot louder on this album than he did on Guitar Town and Exit Zero. Yeah, this is more loud. This is closer to Southern rock when you listen to a lot of these songs. Yeah, it's definitely got more of a Southern rock feel, where before that he was a country guy. And then later on he was more Americana, folk, singer-songwriter at his core. But here the guitars are louder. And so that's where he's going with the heavy metal meets country thing here. Like he also called it heavy metal with bluegrass. And you have mandolins and bluegrass. So you got a little bit of fiddle on here too, which he has on most of his albums anyway. So that's where he's going with that. The fact that it's just louder and more rockin', that it would cross over to people who would like more classic rock music.
Yeah, I think exactly. A bit more raucous, and
Yes.
certainly, I mean, because I was into a lot of the hard rock, and that
Mhm.
certainly pricked up my ears in 1988. All right, the next song is Snake Oil. What do you think of this song?
Yeah, this is more rollicking. This is the piano leading the way. This is again, this is more in the Leonard Skinner feel to me. Particularly the later Skinner albums that would come out when Johnny Van Zant was the singer. It has that kind of feel, but it's very well played. It's got a great verses. The lyrically, it's very strong. It's just a kick-ass tune.
I love the honky tonk keyboards of
Yes,
John
very
Jarvis,
hard.
and John Jarvis's piano playing is sublime on this album all the way through. And I want to have a bit of a shout out about Kurt Custer on the drums. He really hits those skins hard. And
Mhm.
that's why it probably has that little bit of heavy metal reference, because there's a lot of bottom end, there's a lot of whack in a lot of these songs. So there's no subtlety about the drumming. Would you say that's a fair
I would agree.
summary?
Oh, yes, absolutely.
Yeah. But this is a rollicking song. It's got a lot of gusto. It's kind of rockabilly, a little bit of powers into a more of a traditional rock type song, and very political lyrics.
Yep.
And political and country in '84 was a different sort of territory. And that's why I think that a lot of the establishment folk in Nashville didn't sort of like the direction that Steve was going. It's very sort of a timeless. It's about, people in power selling the dream of the working class folk, but really in the end they were just there to hurt them. So it's sort of talking, associating snake oil with politicians of the day. So you can see track 2, he's a very interesting songwriter, and discovering this album, with fresh ears, I was intrigued. So, all right, well, the third song, Back to the Wall.
Okay, this is a song about homelessness in the United States, which is still very prominent here. He gives them a voice. The piano and the guitars work really well on this. Excellent, excellent chorus. He still plays this. I've seen him play this song live. And again, this has more of a Southern rock feel. The solo is very lyrical. I mean, it fits the song perfectly. Excellent track. This got some AOR airplay, as I had emphasized earlier. You hear this a little bit on your album-oriented rock, classic rock stations now.
I love the sentiment. It was, it's a wake-up call to people, to the plight of homelessness and the injustice, and how to help your fellow man, just common decency. And I just think that it's got a really good message. It's a nice slice of Americana, old country. Reminds me of John Cougar Mellencamp. There's sort of these little slivers of John Cougar Mellencamp that comes into this album. Not enough to tip it over and think, oh, he's just copying, but just enough little sort of references or kind of indexes him a little bit. I love the lyric, keep yourself to yourself, keep your bedroll dry. Some of the lyrics are quite devastating in this song, John.
And he's done this his whole career. He's always been speaking for the common man. And his songs tell stories, and they are character studies, and they are about people living here in the United States and the hardships that we face sometimes. I mean, sometimes he does go into a political event, but the thing is, he doesn't pull any punches. Like, you don't have to read between the lines with him when it comes to his lyrics. And the songs that he writes, the melodies are always memorable. Yeah, he's very consistent. I mean, he's like, you're never really disappointed with Steve Earle album. I mean, they're always really good. Maybe you may not like the musical direction he's going sometimes, but his heart's always into it. His songs are always well crafted. Lyrically, they're always fantastic. So yeah, he's one of our finest songwriters. He's one of the finest songwriters in my lifetime.
Yeah, I think as a lyricist, he's really top notch. Do you think that sometimes his lyrics are better than the songs itself, or the melodies?
Sometimes, yep. Oh yeah.
Yeah.
No doubt.
Yeah. All right, The Devil's Right Hand. This is a little bit of a cheeky song. What do you think about this one?
Song about gun control. He still plays this, but he plays it acoustic now, and he plays it faster. And yeah, this is another song. I mean, we were talking about gun control back in '88 here in the States, and it's still a hot button topic here today. Yeah, excellent track. It's held up really well. It's one of his best. Great song.
Not too shabby that it was covered by Johnny Cash, Bob Seger, and Waylon Jennings. Pretty fine company there, isn't it?
That's true. Well, that's the thing. I mean, he started out as a songwriter in Nashville for years before he went solo, and he also played bass in Guy Clark's band. So, I mean, he's a lifer. Like, this is what he was born to do, and he lived his dream. And yeah, I mean, he was like a John Hyatt in the fact that a lot of people were recording his songs before he made it on his own.
Yeah. But again, you look at the lyrics, it tells a story. It's witty. He's a wonderful storyteller, and the protagonist playing a game of cards, and he doesn't like somebody, and he shoots that person, and he blames the devil's right hand, which is like code for insanity. And, I think it's also, talks about the glorification of the gun culture, and also the whole topic of guns can get you in and out of trouble. What side are you of the ledger, so to speak?
Mhm.
So he's a thought-provoking lyricist. It's not always black and white. You kind of have to
Right.
think about what is he saying, and provokes discussion. And I find that interesting as an artist. Like there are some artists that are just very black and white, cookie cutter, but he's not a cookie cutter type of lyricist songwriter. He makes you think outside the box as a listener. Wouldn't you agree?
He did then. I think as time went on, I think his lyrics became more poignant where you knew where he was standing. But at this time, you can read into it and make your own conclusions. Yes.
And he probably had to make a lot of it a little bit more, put more metaphors and not be as black and white, because he wanted to get the commercial. He didn't want to sort of alienate all the commercial support of the Nashville sort of contingent, so to speak. I think he wanted, on one hand, he was doing his own path and being a maverick, but on the other hand, especially when we go into the second side, he still had the commercial chops and wanted to bring that audience along with him.
Yes.
So Johnny Come Lately, this is a really interesting song and features the Pogues. Do you think this works?
Yes. Oh, I've loved this song for the first time I've heard it. Yes, about veterans returning from war. What a fantastic chorus on this! And then that whistling, you got that hook there. Now this works. This works like a charm. I've always loved this song.
It's got lots of folksy. It's whimsy.
Mm-hmm.
It's inspired, a lot of gusto, and the way I've used the word inspired, I think it's inspired that he's used the Pogues in respect of it. And I think it shows his maverick side, that this guy is not just square country. He's looking at other music, what's happening. And again, the lyrics are just wonderful. Just shows different perspectives of these World War II pilots. And then it gets to the fourth verse, and it has the perspective of a Vietnam pilot and the experience, how it's a lot different. And his experiences of returning to America from war are completely in contrast to what's happened before. So again, it's an interesting little character study or vignettes through the eyes of these veterans or these pilots from World War II onwards.
And it has this really joyous feel. I mean, when you've been gone for years and then you're coming back to see your family, it's a very happy time. He made it home. That's the feel. I mean, what could be more joyous than that? That you're gone to war and you don't know if they're going to come back, and he's home. He's safe. He's back with us again. And I think musically, it has that feel as well.
Do you think at heart he's got a sentimental heart?
Absolutely. Absolutely. Steve Earle's heart's on his sleeve. No question. I mean, that's why I think that he's got such a strong following. He's one of us. People really can relate to his lyrics because they've been through this. And that's what I think great songwriters do that. Like the songs mean so much to you because you've been through this at one point or another. Or maybe a family member has, or a friend of yours has. So you feel that. And that even he had all that experience writing for other artists at the beginning. By this point, he was writing excellent songs. And I think he got even better as he got older. Yeah, wonderful songwriting.
Yeah, absolutely. And he's had a very checkered personal life. He's been married 7 times. He was on drug charges. He did a stint in jail. So he's lived a very interesting life. And I think a lot of those experiences come into his song, through his songs. So the next one, like Even When I'm Blue, it shows that he's a kind of a hopeless romantic. What do you think about this song?
Yeah, it's more whimsical. It's like lyrically, it's not the most challenging, but until that chorus kicks in, and that chorus is fantastic. And it's just a great earworm there. But it's just a great love song written with those acoustic guitars. It's got a bit of a Birds feel a little bit with those guitars in it. And it's just a great song. Now, this is when it starts out to become more of a sentimental album, but I think this song works very well. Excellent.
I love the musical lyrical feel to it, and another shout out, the nifty piano lines of John Jarvis, really really nice. Um, yeah, loves me even when I'm blue. He's a romantic at heart, so yeah, it's a good song. All right, so then we go to "You Belong to Me." This was apparently a single, John.
If it was a single, it might have been over on the country charts. I'm not sure if it was.
Yeah, I looked it up on Discog, so I think it may have even just been overseas, but definitely there was a single release.
Okay.
Hmm.
Okay, I could see that. Well, I could see why it would be a single. It's a very memorable song, very memorable melody. The chorus is very simple. He's just singing "You Belong to Me." There is a great bridge in this as well, though, and I think that's what really makes this song well. An acoustic song, but it's complemented by some louder guitars at times. The drums are recorded very well on this song as well.
Yeah, it's got one thing I've got to just tell the folks, even on the drumming side, there's kind of these synth hand claps and there is some
Yes.
drum programming. So it's got a different sort of sound to it that maybe sort of a lot of the critics might say is very much wrapped within it the time. But to me, I still think it's a fine song. I love his vocals. And he tailors his vocals in tonality to suit the material. Sometimes he'll have the Texas drawl, and sometimes he'll croon, and sometimes he'll just play it straight. So there's a lot of different facets to the Steve Earle voice, and it just depends on the material. And in this one, he just does it in the Texas drawl, and I think it's quite intoxicating.
And the thing about, you mentioned Steve's voice, his voice was never finer than on these first few albums. Because when the drug addiction really kicked in, and then he later cleaned up completely, his voice wasn't quite as strong. It didn't have quite the same timbre, it had more of a rasp to it. And as with the albums that have gone on after that, and he's made a ton of albums, is you're buying the albums more to hear the lyrics and the music than you are for his voice. But here he was still a fine singer.
Yeah, there's some really mighty fine singing on this album, but
Mhm.
he just alternates, and I think he just maybe he
That's
does it because
true.
he's taking on a character, and that's what I appreciate. I like my favorite singers, or the singers that I really appreciate, take on characters and can
Mhm.
adjust and surprise you. And this album surprises you. And it was
Mhm.
kind of wonderful listening to this album in 2024 and not listening to hearing a lot of these songs before. It's like a new experience. How can that happen? But it just does. There are so many albums out there to be discovered. Waiting on You. So this was a co-write with Richard Bennett, who was the right-hand man to Neil Diamond for a considerable period of time. Well, what do you think of this song?
Okay, this I don't think has aged as well as the other songs. It's very very of its time, of that country music of its time. It wasn't crossing over to the pop charts, but it had pop sensibilities to it. It has a very good pre-chorus to it. There's keyboards on it. The keyboards on it, when you hear them, you're like, that's 1988. The subtle use of the keyboards, you can hear that in a lot of pop music. So this, I think, is a little dated. It's a good song, but it's one of my least favorites because it kind of feels more of its time. Where I think a lot of these songs on this album, I can hear these songs recorded today and sound like this.
Yeah, I tend to think this is a bit too polished, a bit too adult contemporary. And I think
Right.
maybe Richard Bennett, with his being the sideman to Neil Diamond, because Neil Diamond in this period was very much into the schmaltzy years. And don't get me wrong, folks, I love it. I love Diamond, but early Diamond, not the you don't bring me flowers onwards Diamond. And
Right.
maybe there was too much polish and schmaltz on this particular song, which is not a typical of Steve Earle. And his vocals are not exactly clear. They're a little bit mumbly, so I'm not totally convinced that he was engaged with this song. That's just my take.
I would agree with you on that, Peter. It might have been something he was forced to, it might have been the record company might have said, I believe he was on MCA. This is MCA. Yeah, so the record company might have said, okay, we want something a little more commercial, because he had success with Guitar Town, but he wasn't at the point where he could call his own shots either.
Well, you know what they say about MCA? I think our friend Davey Cretton calls the label, that's where artists go to die.
Yeah, he calls it the cemetery.
The cemetery. And I don't think we should do a show on MCA. Seriously, because there's so many case studies where simply bands do go there and they die. But luckily he didn't die. He kept on going and he survived the MCA curse. But can you hear when a singer or a band just doesn't believe in them, is not engaged with the material? And I think you can without...
Oh, you could.
Yeah. Whether it's in the playing, whether it's in the singing, whether it's just the lyrics, just by the numbers. And I just think this song, it's a little bit by the numbers. Mm-hmm. Okay, we're up to track 9. Once You Love. What do you think of this one?
I like this a little more than Waiting on You. It's pleasant. It does feel, again, like 80s country at this time, but... you got a cool harmonica solo in here. You got some nice piano playing as well. And again, you got a nice bridge in here. So I like this a little more, but again, I don't think it's one of his best songs on the album. No.
Yeah, I'm a sucker for pedal steel guitar, so that got me in. There's something about the pedal steel guitar, I just swoon. I love it. And Bucky Baxter's pedal steel guitar on this song, I think, saves it. I think he's in, sort of troubadour mode. This was a co-write with Larry Crane, which John Mellencamp, so hence the connection. A little bit of a more up-tempo love song. It's got a bit of a crescendo. I like the crescendo with the piano eighths, and then the harmonica comes in, and you've got the big strummy chords. Love will find you. Love will, trust you. And he gets kind of really romantic. So I think it's much better than Waiting on You. So he's building up to something. And I think this is one of the more melodically rich, best played songs on the album. It's a bit more melodically expansive. So, all right. Number 10 finishes with the delicate Nothing But a Child. And it's about Christmas. What do you think about this song?
Duet with Maria McKee. This is very well done, because you got Sam Bush in here on mandolin. You got Jerry Douglas on dobro. He's the master of the dobro. And they were part of Telluride. This works very well. Very nice country ballad. Very good chorus on it. The vocal, Maria and Steve sound so good together. Nice way to close this album. It closes it on more of a somber note, but it's just very well done, very classy. I like it a lot.
Yeah, it's a beautiful Christmas song. It's so delicate. I love the delicate guitar playing. I like his voice. He's got this kind of little bit of vibrato that he brings out. Hence, I was saying earlier, there are a lot of facets to his vocals. It's less gruff. It's haunting, it's stirring, it's lyrical, and I think it's a really beautiful closer to the album. And Maria McKee, before Show Me Heaven, folks, look her up. She's definitely worth exploring. I think it's a beautiful song. Do you think it's how do you think the tracking of the songs? Do you think the song listings in just in the nicely framed? Because you were saying like, and I agree with you. It feels to me like there are two song cycles, side one, side two. Do you think they should have mixed it up?
I don't know. I'm not sure because I'm wondering where would I put what? Because back to the wall, Devil's Right Hand, that has to be on the first half. And Snake Oil, you got to keep up that momentum from the title track. It's got with that honky tonk feel. I actually, maybe it's because I've heard the album for so long, had the album for so long. I guess I'm just so used to the track listing. Excuse me, that I don't know how I would change it. I'm just so used to it being like an album of two halves. How about you?
Yeah, look, I think it probably sits better as two song cycles because it would
Mhm.
be a little bit schizophrenic if you were going from one to the other, sort of one, two,
Right.
one, two, one, two. So I think it
Yeah.
probably flows better. But the tracks on side one, the rock cycle, I'll call it the rock cycle, are definitely much stronger than the second one, where there are some commercial tendencies and influences. But that's not to say that there are not some joys inside too.
Absolutely. Yeah. Yeah, I would agree completely with you. Like how you put that there. You don't want the sequencing to be jarring. You know, it does sound better as two halves because you have Johnny Come Lately, which is upbeat and whimsical, and then it goes into more sentimental material and it flows better. Like I wouldn't have Back to the Wall to end side one, but ending side one with Johnny Come Lately works well to seek your way in to the more acoustic side.
Yeah, for sure. Hey, let's talk about Steve Earle live. Have you had any experiences with Steve? I haven't.
Three times. I saw him in 2003. It was an all acoustic show. It was a triple bill. It was Keb Mo opening. Steve Earle was in the middle slot, and Jackson Brown headlined. That was a good show. And at that point, I only knew the Copperhead Road album and a few other songs. But when I saw him the next two times, then I was more into his music, and then I had a lot of his albums by that point. I saw him in 2019 with the Dukes, his backing band, and it was right when he put out his album called Guy, and that was when he recorded a bunch. It was an album of all Guy Clark songs, and the reason he's made albums like this is when some of his main influences, songwriter and friends, passed on, he would record an album of their songs. That night, that show was fantastic. He did like 28 songs. He played 2 hours. And the opening band was the Mastersons, and they're a husband and wife duo who play in the Dukes. They were fantastic that night. They did hit a lot of stuff from the Guy album, but they went all over the catalog. Excellent show. The third show, where I got the t-shirt from, was in 2021 when he was promoting the Ghosts of West Virginia album. And that show had a lot of special meaning for me because the venue that it was at, they had, because we were still in COVID, they had reduced capacity for about a year. And it was 10%, then 20%, then 30%. And that was the first show that this venue, the Sellersville Theater, had 100% capacity back. And it sold out. And it was a great feel. I remember before they came on stage, they were playing Happy Days Are Here Again, meaning that things were finally getting back to normal. And then Steve Earle and the Dukes came out and they just kicked our butts. Excellent live performer. He plays theaters. Like once he settled into a groove as a singer-songwriter with a cult following, he was playing smaller theaters, like 300 to maybe 1,000 seaters he usually plays. The second time I saw him was at Penn's Peak in Jim Thorpe, Pennsylvania. That was an 1,800-seat venue. They only had a few hundred people there, but we were all into it. We were all diehard Steve Earle fans. Yes, excellent performer live.
Well, I'd love him to come to Australia again. I think he has been to Australia, but I definitely would love to see Steve Earle, and I think I'm a little bit of a fan after this album. So thank you for, I think when we did Jason the Scorchers, I saw the top of your T-shirt, Steve Earle, and I thought, that's interesting, because my wife had the CD, but I've never really played it. And, I've been grooving on it for the last couple of weeks, and yeah. So please, folks, tell us what you think of Steve Earle. Before we get into the wrapping the show up, I think we should just maybe give it a score out of 10. I'd give this a strong 8 out of 10.
I go 8.5. Some of his later albums are better when he went on the indie labels, particularly New West Records, and you can get a ton of his stuff on the New West Records website. Like those albums that were more Americana and folk, those albums, a lot of them are killer. I mean, there's 9s and 9.5s in there. This album, Goes to West Virginia, is excellent. Washington Square Serenade is excellent. I'll Never Get Out of This World Alive. Yeah, so those albums, I mean, I would highly recommend if you want to hear what he's been doing more recently. So, I mean, because like I've said, he's at his core, he's a singer-songwriter. And if you go through his whole catalog, is more Americana and folk than anything else, but sometimes he goes down a bluegrass path. He'll go down a blues path a little bit, and there'll still be one or two like harder songs on some of these albums to remind you, yeah, I could still do that too. But, he's got a very consistent catalog.
Well, I'll definitely check that out. So I'll get out the notepad and the pen and write them down, and I'll definitely check out those albums, because I'm sold on this album. I think it's a really, really strong album. All right, so folks, please tell us what you think of Copperhead Road, Steve Earle. Maybe you could put some recommendations, favourite tracks. We love reading your feedback. Please like and subscribe to Rock Daydream Nation. We cover all different types of genres, anything to associate with rock. John the Music Nut's got a music channel. I will put the link. That's a lot of fun, John. And, any shows that you want to plug while we're all together?
I just have the 2 shows out right now. I put out my top 5 albums of 2024, and I'm starting a series called The Album After, which is going to be me talking about an album that came out after a band's blockbuster album. And the first show in this series, which dropped a few days ago, is the Spin Doctors Turn It Upside Down. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to do a lot more shows like that, and I'm going to do some weekly series on some bands, and then there'll be some single rank of the album shows and a lot of other topics as well.
Anyway, one thing's for sure, me and John will do more shows in 2024. Just check us out, and we'll see you soon. Cheers.